What self-respecting hypnosis geek does not discuss hypnotizing animals? A 2011 episode of the TV show QI on the BBC was dedicated to hypnosis, and on it they discussed some methods of hypnotizing animals. And at the time I did discuss in some depth whether or not the term that we use for hypnosis is actually the same thing that's being experienced by those animals. And how do we actually know, of course? But that's a discussion for another day. I'm not actually offering up that debate today. Instead, I thought I'd offer up, a kind of semi-tongue-in-cheek look at how you actually go about hypnotizing animals. But then I'm going to relate it all to a very real, but old and outdated theory of hypnosis proposed by authors back in the 1950s and 60s. That of immobilization. I'll speak about that. Many have suggested that hypnosis experienced by animals is a physical response, much more than a psychological response. I mean, they're not responding to words, as far as we know, or their own imagination as prescribed by a hypnotist, for example. Though some may think that their imaginations are being engaged as they respond in particular ways, maybe as a natural reaction to a threat, as a defense mechanism, for example. But hypnotizing animals, it is clearly a deep subject then, as you can tell. Again, whether it is or not is a debate for another day. But all these kind of methods and processes render the animal in question motionless and in what appears to be a trance-like or a catatonic state. I'll put a link in the comments section here to a BBC TV show depicting a number of different animals being so-called hypnotized. In the film clip, you get to see some majorly tranced out chickens, for example, as Iggy Pop once sang about. And the commentary suggests that it may be a defense mechanism. The chicken will initially squawk a little bit, especially if it's not used to you. So you need to be sure not to induce unnecessary amounts of stress in the chicken. You'll be much better off using a hen, by all accounts, for a demonstration too, because their demeanor lends itself much better to this kind of thing than a lively cock. Did I just say that? So you start by holding the chicken by the neck and holding its head firmly and comfortably downwards so that it lies flat on the prepared surface. And then you hold the chicken still for a few seconds and it will relax. It will become immobile and it will appear to have drifted off totally. And when you take your own hands away, it will remain in that position. So there you have it, hypnotizing chicken skills. They will eventually awaken themselves, chickens will. However, if you click your fingers or clap your hands, they will awaken and they'll go about their important daily business as if nothing had happened. You can do virtually the same with a frog, useful. To be honest, the process is very similar with all of the animals that this happens to work on. You place the frog carefully and thoughtfully onto its back and hold it in position for a few seconds. Then, when you take your own hands away, the frog simply remains there in that position, and a rather ungainly one it is too. You can either pick the frog up and put it back into its usual standing stance, or you can click your fingers and it'll turn itself back upright with quite an impressive gymnastic display. Again, it's very similar with rabbits. To hypnotize a cute bunny, you place it on its back, hold its ears apart, and even rub them gently with one hand, while you then place its legs, its back legs, gently down onto the table with your other hand. With the lovely cute bunny on its back and stretched out in position, not forcibly, you hold it still for up to 30 seconds or so until you notice that it is immobile and docile. You then take your hands away. Your bunny now appears to be hypnotized and tranced out. It's lying motionless on its back. And to get the bunny back to being an attentive rabbit, you can blow into the rabbit's face and then turn it over onto its side, and it'll then be back sniffing and scampering around as usual. What skills you are learning today. The QI program showed footage of lobsters being hypnotized, and the presenter Stephen Fry actually did hypnotize a lobster on the show. You know, who'd have thought that hypnotizing animals would go as far as to include lobsters? It looks impressive because, you know, a lobster is normally quite scary and formidable looking with its claws and mollusk whiskers, etc. You know, I don't know the official words for those things. Yet the lobster is very easily hypnotized indeed, as these other animals are. You know, you just stand it on its head and use its claws to support it and hold it in a balanced position. And some people have suggested that you stroke it, but really I think that tends to be for effect. It just needs to be held there, and after a few seconds, it will happily remain there in that position, immobile, until you then place it back in its usual position, and so on. So, of course, it's not hypnosis as we know it. It's not the same thing being done to these animals that I teach in class or conduct with my clients and patients in my consulting rooms. Though there is part of me that thinks it would be quite entertaining, would be quite funny. That seems obvious to me. I mean, there has been a time in history, however, in the history of hypnosis, when a very different kind of explanation was being offered up to explain and conceptualize hypnosis. So I recently had the opportunity to watch a 1950s black and white film of William S. Kroger performing a thyroidectomy using only hypnosis as anesthesia. And it's enthralling stuff. And I joked on Facebook that the production values of the film footage are still amazing. And when you consider the date that it was recorded, it's incredible. And when the opening credits rolled, you know, I was kind of expecting Citizen Kane to begin. Nonetheless, the reason I refer to it here today in this video is because within the film footage that Kroger briefly he mentions, he refers to an immobilization theory that's thought to be an atavism. If you look up atavism in any good dictionary, it'll define the term something along the lines of a recurrence in an organism of a trait or a character typical of an ancestral form and usually due to genetic recombination. So this immobilization theory of hypnosis suggests that hypnosis is something that developed from a time in humankind's history when we needed the protective, defensive mechanism to deal with dangerous situations, similar to the way that many people consider fight or flight response to be born out of the time that we were faced with saber-toothed tigers and so on. But this immobilization theory, though, it was developed by the observations of Ivan Pavlov. You know, he noticed that under certain circumstances, an animal in the wild can only survive by being immobile and totally still so that it is not spotted by those seeking prey. And this is noted in Pavlov's 1957 work, Experimental Psychology. This theory was then built upon and developed in the 1960 work by Mears, a system of medical hypnosis, who referred to hypnosis as being something created by a similar need in humans that manifests itself today as what we know as hypnosis. And this kind of immobility reflex, as it's often referred to in academic literature, very much resembles that which we see in the animal hypnosis that I spent far too long speaking about earlier on in this video. Though it is, of course, different in animals than humans, but is suggested to be brought on instinctively and intuitively when there is a physical need of some kind. And this might include any powerful types of emotional stimulus, such as being scared or highly anxious, that leads to someone freezing and is thus rendered immobile. And those that have ever supported this kind of theory, though it was never very dominant and it's certainly hardly ever considered today, still do not really come up with ways in which this shows how hypnosis occurs within individuals. But that said, back in the 50s, when this theory seemed to be at its strongest, in a 1953 edition of the Journal of Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis, Guze, G-U-Z-E, described hypnosis in the following way, that it was a state of readiness for emotional action increasingly subordinated to cortical influence as one ascends phylogeny, but nonetheless consistently present in animal organisms in a variety of forms, and which tends to draw some parallels of the immobilization theory of the day. That's it. That's it for today. That's the aged notion of immobilization as a means of explaining hypnosis. It's not a million miles away from those ideas of people becoming animated, controlled beings, and you can kind of see how it relates to some of those older theories. Do subscribe to this channel. Hit the buttons to get all the latest videos first, and go visit my college website for more information on all of our classroom or online courses. I send you my very best wishes. Goodbye for now.